The call came in at 2:47 a.m. on a Tuesday morning in late October. Possible structure fire, 1847 Memorial Drive, abandoned warehouse district. Smoke visible, unknown occupants. Lieutenant Marcus Hayes was already pulling on his turnout gear before the dispatcher finished speaking, his hands moving through the familiar motions with practiced speed. Around him, the Atlanta Fire Department Station 19 erupted into controlled chaos. Firefighters sliding down poles, engines roaring to life, voices calling coordinates and equipment checks through the pre-dawn darkness. Beside Marcus, his canine partner, a chocolate Labrador retriever named Ash, was already on her feet, ears forward, body tense with anticipation. She wore her working vest, the reflective strips catching the fluorescent lights overhead, and her dark eyes were locked on Marcus with absolute focus. "Ready, girl," Marcus said, his voice calm despite the adrenaline flooding his system. Ash's tail wagged once. Sharp, decisive. She was ready. They loaded into engine 19, Ash taking her position in the specially designed compartment behind the driver's seat, Marcus riding shotgun beside Captain Rodriguez. The engine screamed through the empty streets of Atlanta, lights painting the buildings red and white, siren cutting through the silence like a blade. The warehouse district was a graveyard of forgotten industry, block after block of crumbling brick buildings with broken windows and chain-link fences sagging under their own weight. This part of the city had died decades ago, when the factories closed and the jobs dried up, leaving behind only hollow shells and the people who had nowhere else to go. The homeless had claimed these buildings. Marcus knew that. Everyone knew that. And that meant every fire in this area was a potential tragedy waiting to happen. As Engine 19 rounded the corner onto Memorial Drive, Marcus saw the smoke, a thin grey column rising from a 4-story warehouse with a partially collapsed roof. Not a full blaze, not yet, but smoke meant fire, and fire meant someone inside might be in danger. "Looks like it's just starting," Captain Rodriguez said, his voice tight. "Could be a warming fire that got out of control." Marcus nodded. It was October, and the nights were getting cold. People trying to stay warm often made desperate choices. A trash fire in a barrel, a pile of newspapers too close to a space heater, a cigarette that fell from tired fingers. Engine 19 pulled up to the curb, and Marcus was moving before the vehicle fully stopped. He grabbed his helmet, his flashlight, his radio. Ash jumped down beside him, her body coiled with energy, her nose already working the air. "Primary search," Captain Rodriguez called out. "Hayes, take Ash and sweep the first floor. Patel and Simmons, you're on hose line. We contain this before it spreads." Marcus didn't waste words. He just moved, Ash at his heel, toward the gaping entrance of the warehouse, a loading dock door hanging half off its hinges, the darkness beyond absolute. They entered together. The air inside was thick with smoke, not heavy yet, but building. Marcus's flashlight cut through the grey haze, illuminating a vast open space filled with debris, broken pallets, discarded furniture, piles of rotting fabric and cardboard. The smell was overwhelming. Mold, urine, burned plastic, and underneath it all the acrid bite of active smoke. "Fire department!" Marcus called out, his voice echoing in the cavernous space. "If anyone's in here, call out. We're here to help." Silence. Just the crackle of flames somewhere deeper in the building, and the distant sound of water hitting brick as his team worked the hose line outside. Marcus looked down at Ash. "Find." Ash's nose dropped to the ground. Her body language shifted immediately. Ears back, tail level, movement purposeful and methodical. She was in work mode now, every sense tuned to the task. She could detect human scent even through smoke, even through the overwhelming stench of decay and abandonment. She moved left, sweeping along the perimeter of the space. Marcus followed, his flashlight tracking her movements, his breathing controlled through his mask. They cleared the first section. Nothing, just trash and broken dreams. Then Ash stopped. Her body went rigid, her ears shot forward, and she stared at a doorway in the far corner, partially hidden behind a collapsed shelving unit. Marcus's pulse quickened. "What is it, girl?" Ash looked back at him, then at the doorway. Her tail gave a single decisive wag. She'd found someone. Marcus keyed his radio. "Captain, I've got a possible victim. Northwest corner, first floor. Moving to investigate." "Copy that. Be careful, Hayes." Marcus approached the doorway slowly, Ash beside him, both of them moving through the smoke and darkness like ghosts. He pushed aside the shelving unit. It was lighter than it looked, rusted through and hollow, and shone his flashlight into the room beyond. It was small, maybe 10 by 10. The walls were covered in graffiti, layers upon layers of spray paint creating a chaotic rainbow of color. There was a makeshift bed in one corner, a pile of blankets and old coats stacked on a piece of cardboard, a few plastic bags hung from nails in the wall, filled with what looked like clothes and personal items. A single battery-powered lantern sat on an overturned milk crate, its light dim but still glowing, and on the makeshift bed, curled into a tight ball, was a girl. Marcus's breath caught. She was young, 16, maybe 17 at most, small and thin, with dark skin and hair pulled back in a tight ponytail. She wore a hoodie 3 sizes too big and torn jeans, and she was asleep or unconscious. Marcus couldn't tell which. "Hey!" Marcus called out, his voice gentle but firm. "Hey, can you hear me?" The girl didn't move. Ash whined softly. She moved forward, her body low, and pressed her nose against the girl's hand. The girl's eyes snapped open. For a moment, she just stared at Ash, at Marcus, at the smoke beginning to seep into the room. And then, in one fluid motion, she was on her feet, her back pressed against the wall, her hands raised defensively. "Stay back," she said, her voice hoarse and rough. "I'm not doing anything wrong, I'm just sleeping." "I know," Marcus said, keeping his voice calm, non-threatening. "I'm not here to hurt you. My name's Marcus. I'm a firefighter. There's a fire in this building and we need to get you out. Now." The girl's eyes darted to the doorway, to the smoke growing thicker, to Ash sitting calmly at Marcus's feet. "I don't need help." "Yeah, you do," Marcus said, "because in about 5 minutes, this whole building's going to be filled with smoke, and if you're still in here, you're not going to make it out." The girl hesitated. Marcus could see the war playing out on her face. Pride versus survival, fear versus desperation. "Come with me," Marcus said, extending his hand. "Please." The girl looked at his hand, looked at Ash, and then slowly, she nodded. She grabbed a backpack from the floor. It looked like it held everything she owned, and moved toward Marcus. Ash stood, her tail wagging gently, and the 3 of them moved back through the warehouse, through the smoke and darkness, toward the light. They emerged into the cool morning air, and Marcus guided the girl toward the ambulance parked at the edge of the scene. Paramedics immediately surrounded her, checking her vitals, offering oxygen, asking questions in low, professional voices. Marcus stepped back, giving them space. Ash pressed against his leg and he reached down to stroke her head. "Good girl," he murmured. "Good girl." Captain Rodriguez approached, his face smudged with soot. "Nice work, Hayes." "She okay?" "Physically, I think so, but..." Marcus trailed off, watching the girl sitting on the back of the ambulance, her eyes distant, her body rigid. "She's got nowhere to go, Captain. That room in there? That was her home." Rodriguez's jaw tightened. "Not much we can do about that. We put out fires, we save lives, the rest..." He shrugged. "That's someone else's job." Marcus nodded, but something sat heavy in his chest. He looked at Ash, who was still staring at the girl with those dark, intelligent eyes. "Yeah," Marcus said quietly, "someone else's job." But as he watched the girl refuse a blanket, refuse a ride to the shelter, refuse every offer of help with a quiet, desperate defiance, Marcus realized something. This wasn't over. Not for him, not for Ash, and definitely not for the girl who'd been sleeping in an abandoned warehouse, alone, with nothing but a backpack and a battery-powered lantern to her name, because Ash had found her. And once Ash found someone, she didn't forget them, and neither did Marcus. Marcus Hayes had been a firefighter for 12 years, but he'd been Ash's partner for only 3. He'd grown up in Atlanta, in the Mechanicsville neighborhood not far from where the warehouse fire had been. His father had been a mechanic, his mother a nurse, and Marcus had been the youngest of 4 boys. Money had always been tight, but love had never been scarce. His parents had taught him early, you work hard, you help your neighbors, and you don't look away when someone needs you. That last lesson had stuck. Marcus had joined the fire department at 24, fresh out of college with a degree in criminal justice he'd never used. He'd wanted to be a cop once, but the first time he'd ridden along on a patrol, he'd seen the way people looked at the uniform, with fear, with suspicion, with hatred, and he'd realized he didn't want to be feared. He wanted to be the person people were relieved to see, so he'd become a firefighter. And for 9 years he'd loved the work, the camaraderie, the purpose, the feeling of pulling someone out of danger and knowing absolutely that you'd made a difference. But 3 years ago, something had shifted. He'd been first on scene at an apartment fire in East Atlanta. 3-story building, fully involved, flames pouring from every window. They'd evacuated most of the residents, but there was one unit they couldn't reach. Third floor back corner, flames blocking the only entrance. They'd known someone was inside. The neighbors had said so. An elderly woman, lived alone, didn't get out much. Marcus had wanted to go in, had been ready to go in, but Captain Rodriguez had pulled him back. It's too hot, Hayes. The floor's going to collapse, we can't risk it. And Marcus had stood there, helpless, and watched the building burn. They'd found the woman's body 3 days later, after the fire had been extinguished and the structure deemed safe to enter. Marcus hadn't slept for a week, and when the department had offered him the chance to train with a canine partner, a dog specifically trained for search and rescue in fire situations, he'd said yes, without hesitation. That's how he'd met Ash. She'd been 2 years old, a chocolate lab with soft eyes and a nose that could detect human scent through 6 feet of rubble. She'd been bred for this work, trained for it, and she was exceptional. But more than that, she was kind, gentle, patient, the kind of dog that could walk into chaos and bring calm with her. They'd trained together for 6 months, learning each other's rhythms, each other's signals, building the kind of trust that only came from absolute reliance. And when they'd been certified and assigned to Station 19, Marcus had felt something he hadn't felt since before that apartment fire: hope. Because with Ash, he could find people. He could reach them when others couldn't. He could make sure that no one else died alone in the dark, waiting for help that never came. Station 19 was a second home. It sat on Edgewood Avenue, a 3-story brick building that smelled like coffee and diesel and decades of history. The crew was small, 18 firefighters, 3 engines, 1 ladder truck, but they were family. They ate together, trained together, celebrated birthdays and grieved losses together. Marcus's bunk was on the 2nd floor, in a room he shared with 3 other firefighters. Ash had her own bed in the corner, a large cushion with her name embroidered on it, a gift from the crew when she'd first arrived. She slept there most nights, though sometimes Marcus would wake to find her pressed against his bunk, her head resting on the edge of the mattress, keeping watch. The morning after the warehouse fire, Marcus sat in the station's common room with a cup of coffee and a plate of scrambled eggs he wasn't eating. Ash lay at his feet, her eyes half closed but always aware. "You okay, Hayes?" It was Lieutenant Jamal Carter, a 15-year veteran with a shaved head and a scar across his left eyebrow from a roof collapse in 2018. He sat down across from Marcus, his own coffee steaming in his hands. "Yeah," Marcus said. "Just thinking." "About the girl?" Marcus nodded. "She wouldn't take help, wouldn't go to a shelter, just took her backpack and walked away." Carter sighed. "A lot of them are like that. They don't trust the system. Can't say I blame them." "How old do you think she was?" 16, maybe, 17 at most." Carter shook his head. "Too damn young to be living like that." Marcus took a sip of his coffee. It was lukewarm and bitter. "She had a whole setup in there. Blankets, lantern, bags of stuff. She'd been there a while. Probably lost her spot when we put out the fire." "Yeah." Marcus stared into his coffee. "Yeah, probably." Ash's head lifted. She looked at Marcus, then stood and pressed her nose against his knee. It was her way of checking in, of making sure he was okay. Marcus smiled faintly and scratched behind her ears. "I'm good, girl. Just thinking." Carter watched them, his expression thoughtful. "Ash liked her, didn't she?" Marcus glanced down at his partner. "How'd you know?" "Because Ash doesn't usually whine like that. She only does it when she's worried about someone." Marcus remembered the sound Ash had made when they'd found the girl. That soft, almost plaintive whine. It wasn't a sound she made often. Usually she was all business, focused, professional, but with the girl something had been different. "Yeah," Marcus said quietly. "She liked her. You thinking about trying to find her?" Marcus looked up sharply. "What?" Carter shrugged. "Just a question. You've got that look." "What look?" "The look you get when you're about to do something that's technically not your job, but you're going to do it anyway." Marcus opened his mouth to deny it, but the words didn't come. Because Carter was right. He was thinking about finding her. He'd been thinking about it since the moment she'd walked away from the ambulance, her shoulders hunched, her backpack slung over one thin shoulder. "It's not my job," Marcus said finally. "No," Carter agreed. "It's not." They sat in silence for a moment. The only sound, the low hum of the television in the corner and the distant clatter of someone washing dishes in the kitchen. "But that doesn't mean you won't do it," Carter said, standing. He clapped Marcus on the shoulder. "Just be careful, man. The world's got a way of breaking your heart when you care too much." Marcus watched him walk away, then looked down at Ash. "What do you think, girl? Should we try to find her?" Ash's tail wagged, just once, but it was enough. Marcus spent his day off searching, He started at the warehouse on Memorial Drive, but the building had been condemned and boarded up after the fire. Yellow tape stretched across the entrance, and a notice from the city warned that anyone caught trespassing would be prosecuted. He moved through the surrounding blocks, talking to people who lived and worked in the area. Most of them didn't know anything or wouldn't say if they did, but a few gave him pieces, small fragmented clues. A convenience store clerk remembered seeing a girl matching her description, buying bottled water and granola bars. Comes in maybe once a week, always pays with exact change, never talks much. A man sleeping under a highway overpass said he'd seen her around. Keeps to herself, doesn't hang with the other kids. Smart, that one. Knows how to stay invisible. A woman at a community outreach center shook her head sadly. If she's not coming to us for help, there's not much we can do. A lot of these kids, they don't trust anyone. They've been burned too many times. Marcus walked for hours, Ash beside him, scanning every face, every alley, every shadowed doorway. But the city was vast, and one girl could disappear into it like a drop of water into an ocean. By the time the sun set, Marcus was exhausted and no closer to finding her. He sat on a bench in Woodruff Park, Ash lying at his feet, and pulled out his phone. He scrolled through the photos he'd taken of the missing person flyers posted around the area. Faces of runaways, of kids who'd vanished, of families still searching. None of them matched the girl from the warehouse, which meant no one was looking for her. Or maybe, Marcus thought with a sick feeling in his stomach, no one cared. Ash whined softly and rested her head on Marcus's knee. "I know," Marcus murmured. "I know, girl, we'll keep looking." But as he sat there, watching the city lights blink on one by one, Marcus couldn't shake the feeling that he was fighting a losing battle, that the girl was already gone, and that even if he found her, he wouldn't be able to help. Because how do you save someone who doesn't want to be saved? 4 days after the warehouse fire, Marcus got the call he'd been dreading. He was at the station, running drills with Ash in the training yard, obstacle courses designed to simulate collapsed structures and tight spaces. Ash was in the middle of navigating a tunnel made of plywood and 2x4s when Marcus's phone buzzed. Unknown number. Marcus almost didn't answer, but something made him swipe to accept. "Hello? Is this Lieutenant Hayes?" The voice was male, older, professional. "Yeah, this is Hayes. Who's this?" "Detective Paul Morrison, Atlanta PD. I'm calling about an incident that occurred early this morning in the Old Fourth Ward. We found your business card on a person of interest, and I was hoping you could help us out." Marcus's pulse quickened. "What kind of incident?" "Attempted robbery. Convenience store on Boulevard. The suspect is a juvenile female, approximately 16 or 17 years old. She's refusing to give us her name and she's not in the system, but she had your card in her pocket." Marcus's breath caught. "Is she hurt?" "No, she's fine, but she's not talking, and if we can't identify her, we're going to have to process her through juvenile detention. I was hoping you might know who she is." "Where is she?" "Fulton County Juvenile Detention Center." "You want to come down?" Marcus was already moving. "I'll be there in 20 minutes. He hung up, grabbed Ash's lead, and headed for his truck. The Fulton County Juvenile Detention Center was a low utilitarian building surrounded by chain-link fences topped with razor wire. Marcus had been here before, field trips with the fire department, community outreach programs designed to scare kids straight. He hated the place. It smelled like industrial cleaner and desperation. Detective Morrison met him in the lobby. He was in his 50s, broad-shouldered, with graying hair and tired eyes. He extended a hand. "Lieutenant Hayes." "Thanks for coming." Marcus shook his hand. "She's really not talking. Not a word. Won't even tell us her name. We ran her prints, but she's not in the system. No arrests, no missing person reports that match. It's like she doesn't exist." "What happened?" Morrison led Marcus down a hallway lined with locked doors. Store owner called it in around 6 a.m., said she came in, grabbed a bunch of food, and tried to walk out without paying. When he confronted her, she ran. Officers caught her 2 blocks away. "Did she have any money on her?" 17 cents. Marcus's jaw tightened. "So she was stealing because she was hungry." "That's what it looks like, but the store owner wants to press charges. Says she's hit him 3 times in the past 2 weeks. They stopped in front of a door with a small window. Morrison gestured for Marcus to look inside. The girl sat at a metal table, her hands folded in her lap, her eyes fixed on the floor. She looked smaller than Marcus remembered, more fragile. Her hoodie was gone, confiscated probably, and she wore a grey detention center uniform that hung off her thin frame like a tent. "Can I talk to her?" Marcus asked. Morrison nodded. "Be my guest." Maybe she'll open up to you. Marcus entered the room, Ash at his side. The girl's head snapped up, and for a moment, Marcus saw something flicker in her eyes. Recognition, relief, fear. "Hey," Marcus said softly, sitting down across from her. "Remember me?" The girl didn't respond. She just stared at him, her expression unreadable. "I'm the firefighter who found you in the warehouse. This is Ash." He gestured to the lab, who sat calmly beside him, her eyes on the girl. "She's the one who found you, actually. She's really good at finding people." Still nothing. Marcus leaned back in his chair, keeping his body language open, non-threatening. "Look, I'm not a cop. I'm not here to get you in trouble. I just want to help." "I don't need help," the girl said, her voice flat. "Yeah, you do, because right now you're looking at theft charges. And if you don't give them a name, a parent, a guardian, someone they can contact, they're going to process you through the system. And once you're in, it's really hard to get out." The girl's jaw tightened, but she didn't speak. "What's your name?" Marcus asked gently. "Doesn't matter. It matters to me." The girl looked at him, really looked at him, and Marcus saw the exhaustion in her eyes, the kind of bone-deep weariness that came from fighting too hard for too long. "Zoe," she said finally. "My name's Zoe." "Zoe," Marcus repeated, letting the name settle. "That's a good name. I'm Marcus, and this is Ash." At the mention of her name, Ash stood and moved closer to the table. She rested her chin on the edge, her eyes soft and warm, and looked up at Zoe. Zoe's expression cracked, just a little. She reached out, hesitant, and placed her hand on Ash's head. Ash's tail wagged, and Zoe's eyes filled with tears. "I'm sorry," she whispered, her voice breaking. "I didn't know what else to do. I was so hungry, and I didn't have any money, and I just—" She stopped, biting her lip, trying to hold it together. Marcus's chest tightened. "How long have you been on the streets, Zoe?" Zoe wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. 8 months. Maybe 9. I don't really keep track anymore." "Where are your parents?" Zoe's face hardened. "Gone." "Gone where?" "Just gone." She looked away. "I was in foster care for a while, but the last place, it wasn't good. So I left." Marcus felt a cold anger settle in his gut. He'd heard stories like this before. Kids slipping through the cracks of a system that was supposed to protect them. Kids who chose the streets because even that was better than where they'd been. "Zoe, if you go back into the system now, maybe we can find you a better placement. Somewhere safe, somewhere—" "No." Zoe's voice was sharp, final. "I'm not going back. I'd rather be in juvie." "Zoe, you don't understand." She looked at him, her eyes fierce. "The system doesn't work, not for kids like me. I've been shuffled around my whole life, foster home to foster home. Some were okay, most weren't. And the last one," she shook her head. "I'm not going back." Marcus wanted to argue, wanted to tell her she was wrong, that there were good people out there, good places. But looking at her, at the scars on her knuckles, the shadows under her eyes, the way she held herself like she was always ready to run, he knew she wouldn't believe him. Because she'd already learned the hard way that the world didn't care about kids like her. "Okay," Marcus said quietly. "Okay, but will you let me try to help? Not by sending you back into the system. Just let me see what I can do." Zoe looked at him for a long moment, then at Ash, who was still resting her chin on the table, her eyes warm and patient. "Why?" Zoe asked. "Why do you care?" Marcus thought about the elderly woman who died in the apartment fire, about the guilt he still carried, about the promise he'd made to himself that he'd never stand by and do nothing again. "Because Ash found you," he said simply. "And once she finds someone, she doesn't forget, and neither do I." Zoe's eyes filled with tears again, but this time she didn't try to hide them. She just nodded, her hand still resting on Ash's head. "Okay," she whispered. "Okay." Marcus left the detention center with a plan, or the beginning of one. He talked to Detective Morrison, who agreed to hold off on filing formal charges if Marcus could find a temporary placement for Zoe. "But she can't stay in limbo forever, Hayes. If you can't find something in the next 72 hours, we're moving forward with processing." "Understood," Marcus said. "I'll figure it out." But as he drove back to the station, Ash in the passenger seat beside him, Marcus had no idea how he was going to keep that promise. Because finding a safe place for a teenage runaway with no family, no documentation, and a deep distrust of the system, that was a problem he didn't know how to solve. Not yet. But he was going to try. Because he'd made a promise. And Marcus Hayes didn't break promises. Marcus spent the next 48 hours making calls. He contacted every youth shelter, every group home. every social services agency in the Atlanta metro area. The answers were always the same: full capacity, waiting lists, funding cuts, not equipped for her needs. One caseworker was blunt: without proper documentation and a formal referral from the state, we can't take her. Our hands are tied. Marcus tried the foster care system next, calling the state hotline, navigating automated menus, finally reaching a human being who listened with what sounded like genuine sympathy before delivering the bad news. If she's a runaway from a previous placement, she'll need to be re-entered into the system through the proper channels. That means court hearings, evaluations, background checks. It could take weeks, maybe months. She doesn't have weeks, Marcus said, his frustration bleeding through. She's got 72 hours before she's processed through juvenile detention. I'm sorry, Mr. Hayes. I truly am. But there's a protocol. Marcus hung up before he said something he'd regret. He sat in his truck outside the station, his head in his hands, ash pressed against his side. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple, and Marcus felt the weight of failure settling over him like a physical thing. He'd made a promise, and he was breaking it. His phone buzzed. A text from Detective Morrison. Hayes, time's almost up. Need an answer by tomorrow morning. Marcus closed his eyes, breathed, tried to think, and then Ash barked. It was a single, sharp sound, unusual for her. Marcus looked down, and Ash was staring at him with those intelligent dark eyes, her tail wagging slowly. What is it, girl? Ash barked again, then stood and moved to the truck door, looking back at Marcus expectantly. Marcus frowned. You need to go out? But Ash didn't move toward the grass. She just stood there, waiting, her body language clear. Follow me. Marcus had learned long ago to trust Ash's instincts, so he opened the door and followed. Ash led him not toward the station, but toward the street. She walked with purpose, her nose working the air, her pace steady. Marcus followed, his curiosity growing. They walked 3 blocks, turning down side streets Marcus knew well, past the corner store where he bought coffee, past the barber shop where half the crew got their hair cut, past the community center where the neighborhood kids played basketball, and then Ash stopped. They stood in front of a small brick house, 2 stories, with a neat front yard and a porch swing. The windows glowed with warm light, and through them, Marcus could see movement, people, a family, going about their evening. Marcus knew this house, knew the family that lived here, the Washingtons, Pastor Jerome Washington and his wife Grace. They ran a small church a few blocks over, New Hope Baptist. Marcus had met them years ago during a community outreach event, and they'd become friends. The kind of people who remembered your birthday and always had an extra plate at their table. But more importantly, the Washingtons had a history of taking in kids. Foster kids, troubled kids, kids who needed a second chance. Their house was always full, always loud, always alive with the sound of laughter and love. Marcus looked down at Ash. You think they can help? Ash's tail wagged, just once. But it was enough. Marcus climbed the steps and knocked on the door. Grace Washington answered, her face lighting up with a smile when she saw Marcus. She was in her late 50s, round and warm, with graying hair pulled back in a bun and eyes that seemed to see straight through to your soul. Marcus Hayes, what a lovely surprise. Come in and bring that beautiful dog of yours. Marcus stepped inside, Ash at his heel. The house smelled like baking bread and vanilla candles, and somewhere in the back he could hear children's voices, laughing, arguing, playing. Grace, I'm sorry to drop by unannounced, but I need to talk to you and Pastor Washington. It's important. Grace's smile faded, replaced by concern. Of course, baby. Jerome's in the kitchen. Come on back. She led him through the living room, crowded with mismatched furniture, family photos covering every available surface, toys scattered across the floor, into a large kitchen where Pastor Washington stood at the stove, stirring a pot of something that smelled incredible. Jerome Washington was tall and broad-shouldered, with a salt and pepper beard and a voice that could fill a room. He looked up when Marcus entered and grinned. Marcus, good to see you, son. You staying for dinner? I wish I could, Pastor, but I'm here because I need your help. Jerome's expression shifted, becoming serious. He turned off the stove and gestured for Marcus to sit at the kitchen table. What's going on? Marcus told them everything. About finding Zoe in the warehouse, about her refusing help, her arrest, her time in detention, about the 72-hour deadline and his failed attempts to find her a safe place. When he finished, the kitchen was silent except for the ticking of the clock on the wall. Grace spoke first, her voice soft. This girl, Zoe, how old is she? 16, I think. maybe 17, and she has no family. No one looking for her? No one. Grace looked at her husband. Jerome looked at Grace. And in that moment, Marcus saw an entire conversation pass between them. Wordless, effortless, the kind of communication that only came from decades of partnership. Finally, Jerome sighed. We're already at capacity, Marcus. We've got 4 kids living with us right now. 2 foster placements and 2 of our grandkids while their mama gets back on her feet. The house is full. Marcus's heart sank. I understand. But, Grace interrupted, her voice firm. We've never turned away a child in need, and we're not about to start now. Marcus looked up sharply. You'll take her. We'll take her, Grace confirmed. Temporarily at least. Until we can figure out something more permanent. But Marcus, you need to understand, this girl's been through trauma. She's not going to trust us right away. It's going to be hard work. I know, Marcus said, his throat tight. I know, but she deserves a chance. Jerome nodded slowly. Then we'll give her one. When can you bring her by? Tomorrow morning, if that's okay. That's fine, Grace said. She stood and placed a hand on Marcus's shoulder. You did good, Marcus, coming here, fighting for her. A lot of people would have given up. Marcus shook his head. I didn't do anything. Ash did. She's the one who led me here. Grace looked down at Ash, who was sitting calmly at Marcus's feet, and smiled. Smart dog. Ash's tail wagged. The next morning, Marcus picked Zoe up from the detention center. She was quiet during the drive, her backpack clutched in her lap, her eyes fixed on the window as Atlanta rolled past. Where are we going? She asked finally. To meet some people, Marcus said. Pastor Jerome and Grace Washington, they run a group home. They've agreed to let you stay with them for a while. Zoe's body went rigid. A group home? Like a foster home? It's different, Marcus said quickly. The Washingtons are good people. They don't do it for the money. They do it because they care. That's what they all say. Zoe. I'm not staying long, she interrupted, her voice hard. I'm just going to wait until I figure something else out, and then I'm gone. Marcus glanced at her. Okay, that's your choice. But will you at least give them a chance? Just meet them, talk to them, and if you really hate it, we'll figure out something else. Zoe didn't answer. She just turned back to the window, her jaw set, her shoulders tense. When they arrived at the Washington house, Grace was waiting on the porch. She didn't rush forward, didn't overwhelm. She just stood there smiling, her hands folded in front of her. You must be Zoe, she said warmly. I'm Grace, it's so nice to meet you. Zoe didn't respond. She just stood there, her backpack slung over one shoulder, her eyes wary. Grace didn't seem bothered. She just gestured toward the door. Why don't you come inside? I made breakfast, and I'd love for you to meet the other kids. Zoe looked at Marcus. He nodded encouragingly. It's okay. I'll be right here. Slowly, reluctantly, Zoe followed Grace inside. The house was loud, kids running through the hallways, a television playing in the living room, someone practicing piano upstairs. It was chaotic and messy and full of life. Grace led Zoe to the kitchen, where the other kids were gathered around the table, 4 of them ranging in age from 8 to 15. They looked up when Zoe entered, curious but not unkind. Everyone, this is Zoe, Grace said. She's going to be staying with us for a while. I want you all to make her feel welcome. A boy around Zoe's age, tall and lanky with a bright smile, waved. Hey, I'm Dante. The others introduced themselves. 2 younger boys, Marcus and Elijah, and a girl named Keisha who looked about 12. They were polite, friendly but not pushy. They gave Zoe space. Grace set a plate in front of Zoe. Scrambled eggs, bacon, toast, fruit. You must be hungry. Eat up. Zoe stared at the plate. And then, slowly, she picked up a fork and took a bite. Marcus watched from the doorway, Ash beside him, and felt something loosen in his chest. It wasn't perfect, it wasn't a solution, but it was a start. And sometimes, a start was all you needed. Over the next few days, Marcus checked in regularly. He'd stop by the Washington house after his shifts, bringing supplies, asking how Zoe was adjusting, making sure she was okay. The reports were mixed. She's quiet, Grace said on the 3rd day. Doesn't talk much, keeps to herself, but she's polite. She helps with chores without being asked. And she's good with the younger kids. Has she opened up at all? Marcus asked. Grace shook her head. Not yet, but these things take time. On the 5th day, Marcus brought Ash with him. The moment they walked through the door, Zoe appeared at the top of the stairs. Her face lit up when she saw the dog. Ash, she breathed, hurrying down the steps. Ash's tail wagged furiously, and she moved toward Zoe, pressing her head against the girl's leg. Zoe dropped to her knees and wrapped her arms around the dog, burying her face in Ash's fur. Marcus watched, his chest tight. "She missed you." "I missed her too," Zoe whispered. It was the most emotion Marcus had seen from her since they'd met. "Do you want to take her for a walk?" Marcus asked. Zoe looked up, her eyes wide. "Can I?" "Of course." They walked through the neighborhood together, Marcus, Zoe, and Ash. The afternoon was warm and bright, and the streets were full of people going about their lives. Zoe walked with her hand resting lightly on Ash's head, and slowly, bit by bit, she began to talk. She told Marcus about her childhood, bouncing between foster homes, never staying anywhere long enough to feel safe. She told him about the last placement, the one she'd run from, and Marcus's hands curled into fists as he listened to what she'd endured. "I'm sorry," he said when she finished. "I'm so sorry that happened to you." Zoe shrugged, her voice flat. "It's not your fault." "No, but it shouldn't have happened. You deserved better." Zoe didn't respond. She just kept walking, her hand still on Ash's head. After a long silence, she spoke again. "Why are you doing this? Helping me? You don't even know me." Marcus thought about his answer carefully. "Because I think everyone deserves a second chance, and because Ash found you, and once she finds someone, she doesn't let go." Zoe looked down at Ash, who gazed up at her with those soft, steady eyes. "She's special, isn't she?" "Yeah," Marcus said. "She is. So are you," Zoe said quietly. Marcus's throat tightened. "Thanks, Zoe." They walked in comfortable silence after that, the three of them, until the sun began to set and it was time to head back. And for the first time since Marcus had found her in that warehouse, Zoe smiled. It was small, tentative, but it was real, and it was enough. 3 weeks after Zoe moved in with the Washingtons, Marcus got the call he'd been hoping for, and dreading. It was Grace, her voice tight with something Marcus couldn't quite name. Not panic, not anger, but something close. "Marcus, can you come by? There's something we need to talk about." "Is Zoe okay?" "She's fine, physically, but just come by, please." Marcus was there in 15 minutes, Ash in the passenger seat beside him. When he arrived, Grace met him at the door. Her face was drawn, her eyes tired. "What happened?" Marcus asked. "Come inside." She led him into the living room, where Pastor Washington sat on the couch, his expression grave. Zoe sat in the armchair across from him, her arms wrapped around herself, her eyes red-rimmed. Marcus's stomach dropped. "Zoe, what's wrong?" Zoe didn't answer. She just looked at the floor. Grace sat down beside her husband and folded her hands in her lap. "Marcus, Zoe told us something today, something important, and we think you need to hear it." Marcus looked at Zoe. "What is it?" Zoe's lip trembled. She opened her mouth, closed it, then tried again. "I have a sister." Marcus blinked. "What?" "I have a sister," Zoe repeated, her voice barely above a whisper. "Her name's Maya, she's 12, and she's still with him." "With who?" Marcus asked, though he already knew the answer made his blood run cold. "My last foster father," Zoe said, her voice breaking. "The one I ran away from." The room fell silent. Marcus felt something dark and cold settle in his chest. "Zoe, did he hurt her?" Zoe nodded, tears streaming down her face. "I tried to protect her. I tried to keep him away from her, but he was stronger, and he said if I told anyone, he'd make it worse for her. So I didn't, I ran and I left her there." Her voice cracked on the last word, and she buried her face in her hands, her shoulders shaking with sobs. Grace moved immediately, wrapping her arms around Zoe, holding her close. "Oh, baby, you did what you had to do to survive. That's not your fault." "But she's still there," Zoe choked out. "She's still with him, and I left her." Marcus felt rage, hot and sharp, flood through him. He looked at Pastor Washington, who met his gaze with a nod. "We need to call the police," Marcus said. "Already done," Jerome said. "Detective Morrison is on his way." Detective Morrison arrived 20 minutes later, his face grim. He sat across from Zoe, his notebook open, his voice gentle but firm. "Zoe, I need you to tell me everything. Where is your sister? Who is the foster father? And what did he do?" Zoe's hands shook as she spoke, but she told him. She gave him the address, the man's name, Richard Caldwell, and the details of what had happened in that house. The abuse, the threats, the way he'd isolated them, made them afraid to speak. Morrison's jaw tightened as he wrote. When Zoe finished, he looked up. "We're going to get your sister out of there, I promise you, tonight." "What if he hurts her?" Zoe whispered. "What if he knows I told?" "We're not going to let that happen," Morrison said firmly. He stood, "Hayes, can I talk to you outside?" Marcus followed him onto the porch. The night was cool, the air smelling of rain. Morrison spoke quietly. "We're going to raid the house tonight. I'm coordinating with Child Protective Services and a trauma response team. But I need you to understand, this is going to be hard. On Zoe, on the sister, on everyone involved." "I know," Marcus said, "but it's the right thing to do." Morrison nodded. "I'll call you when we have her." The wait was excruciating. Marcus stayed at the Washington house, sitting with Zoe, Grace, and Jerome in the living room. No one spoke much. They just waited, the clock ticking, the hours crawling by. Ash stayed pressed against Zoe's leg the entire time, her head resting on the girl's knee, her presence a steady comfort. At 11:43 p.m., Marcus's phone rang. "Hayes, it's Morrison. We've got her. Maya's safe. Caldwell's in custody." Marcus exhaled, his eyes closing. "Thank God. We're bringing her to the hospital for evaluation, but after that, she's going to need a place to stay. The state's going to want to place her in emergency foster care, but given what happened..." Morrison trailed off. Marcus looked at Grace and Jerome. They were already nodding. "Bring her here," Marcus said. "She can stay with her sister." Maya Brennan arrived at the Washington house just after 1 a.m., escorted by a CPS caseworker and Detective Morrison. She was small for 12, with the same dark skin and wide eyes as her sister, and she looked terrified. Zoe was on her feet the moment the door opened. "Maya!" Maya's face crumpled, and she ran toward her sister. They collided in the middle of the room, holding each other, crying, neither of them letting go. Marcus watched, his throat tight, as Grace moved forward and wrapped her arms around both girls. "You're safe now," she murmured. "You're both safe." And slowly, finally, the girls began to believe it. The weeks that followed were hard. Maya had nightmares. She was jumpy, distrustful, afraid of loud noises and sudden movements. Zoe blamed herself, carrying guilt that no amount of reassurance could lift. But Grace and Jerome were patient. They were kind. And slowly, bit by bit, the girls began to heal. Marcus visited often, bringing Ash with him every time. The dog had a way of making both girls smile. Her goofy energy, her gentle patience, her uncanny ability to sense when someone needed comfort. One afternoon, Marcus found Zoe and Maya in the backyard, throwing a ball for Ash. They were laughing, real, genuine laughter, and Marcus felt something shift in his chest. Hope. "She's good for them," Grace said, standing beside him. "Ash, she's good for all of us." Marcus smiled. "Yeah, she is. You are too, you know. Good for them." Marcus shook his head. "I'm just doing what anyone would do." "No," Grace said firmly. "Most people would have walked away, but you didn't. You fought for them, and because of that, they have a future." Marcus didn't know what to say to that, so he just watched the girls play with Ash, his heart full, and let himself believe that maybe, just maybe, he'd done something good. 2 months after Maya's rescue, Marcus received a letter. It came in a plain white envelope, addressed to him at the fire station, with no return address. Inside was a single sheet of lined paper, covered in careful, looping handwriting. "Dear Lieutenant Hayes, I don't really know how to start this, so I'm just going to say it. Thank you. Thank you for not giving up on me. Thank you for finding me in that warehouse and not just leaving me there. Thank you for believing me when I told you about Maya and for helping us get her out. You saved our lives, both of us. I know I wasn't easy. I know I pushed you away and didn't trust you, but you kept showing up anyway, you and Ash, and that meant more to me than I can ever say. Pastor Jerome and Miss Grace say we can stay here as long as we need. They're good people. Maya's doing better. She's smiling again. She's starting to believe that maybe things can be okay, and so am I. I'm going back to school next month. Miss Grace enrolled me at the high school downtown. I'm nervous, but I'm also kind of excited. I never thought I'd get to finish school, but now I can and I want to, because you made me believe that I have a future. I don't know what I want to do yet, but maybe something like what you do, helping people, making a difference. You showed me that one person can change everything, and I want to be that person for someone else someday. Thank you, Lieutenant Hayes, for everything. Zoe P.S. Ash is the best dog in the world. Tell her I said hi. Marcus read the letter 3 times, his vision blurring with tears he didn't try to hide. Captain Rodriguez found him sitting in the common room, the letter in his hands, Ash pressed against his leg. You okay, Hayes? Marcus nodded, unable to speak. Rodriguez sat down beside him. Good news? The best, Marcus managed. Rodriguez smiled. Then why do you look like you're about to cry? Because, Marcus said, his voice thick, because sometimes good things do happen, And sometimes we get to be part of them. Rodriguez clapped him on the shoulder. Yeah, man, sometimes we do. 3 months later, Marcus stood in the back of New Hope Baptist Church, watching as Pastor Washington delivered the Sunday sermon. The sanctuary was full. Families crowded into pews, children wiggling in their seats, voices raised in song. And in the front row, sitting with Grace, were Zoe and Maya. Zoe wore a simple dress, her hair pulled back, her face calm. Maya sat beside her, their shoulders touching, a small smile on her face. They looked like sisters, like family. After the service, Marcus waited outside. Zoe and Maya found him on the steps, and Zoe threw her arms around him in a hug that nearly knocked him over. You came, she said, grinning. Of course I came, Marcus said. Wouldn't miss it. Maya hugged him next, shyer but no less genuine. Thank you, Lieutenant Hayes. Just Marcus is fine, he said, smiling. Ash barked once and both girls laughed, dropping to their knees to shower the dog with attention. Grace appeared beside Marcus, her eyes shining. They're doing well, both of them. Better than I ever expected. They're strong, Marcus said. They are, Grace agreed. But they also had someone who believed in them, someone who didn't give up. That made all the difference. Marcus watched Zoe and Maya play with Ash, their laughter ringing through the afternoon air, and felt a peace he hadn't felt in years. He'd kept his promise, he'd saved them, and in doing so, maybe he'd saved himself too. 1 year later, Marcus stood in the auditorium of Grady High School, surrounded by proud parents and family members, as Zoe walked across the stage to receive her diploma. She'd done it. Against all odds, she'd finished high school. The crowd erupted in applause, but Marcus's cheers were the loudest. Beside him, Grace and Jerome were on their feet, tears streaming down their faces. Maya was jumping up and down, clapping wildly. And Ash, sitting calmly at Marcus's feet, her tail wagging, seemed to understand that something important was happening. After the ceremony, Zoe found Marcus in the crowd. She was beaming, her eyes bright, her diploma clutched in her hands. I did it, she said, her voice full of wonder. You did, Marcus said, pulling her into a hug. I'm so proud of you. I couldn't have done it without you. Yes, you could have, Marcus said firmly. You're stronger than you know, Zoe. Zoe smiled, tears streaming down her face. Maybe, but it was easier because you were there. That evening, back at the Washington house, the family gathered for a celebration. The table was covered with food. Grace's famous fried chicken, macaroni and cheese, collard greens, cornbread. The house was full of laughter and music and life. Marcus sat at the table, Ash at his feet, and watched as Zoe and Maya helped serve the younger kids, their movements easy and comfortable. They belonged here. They were home. You did good, Marcus, Jerome said, sitting down beside him. Real good. I just opened a door, Marcus said. They did the rest. That's all any of us can do, Jerome said. Open doors. Show people they're not alone. The rest is up to them. Marcus nodded, his chest full. Later, as the sun set and the family gathered on the porch, Zoe sat down beside Marcus. She was quiet for a moment, then spoke. I've been thinking about what I want to do after graduation. Yeah? I want to be a social worker, Zoe said. I want to help kids like me, kids who've been forgotten. Marcus smiled. That's a great goal. It's because of you, Zoe said. You showed me that one person can change everything, and I want to be that person. Marcus's throat tightened. You already are, Zoe. Zoe leaned her head on his shoulder, and they sat there together, watching the stars come out, Ash curled at their feet. And Marcus thought about the night he'd found Zoe in that warehouse, about how close she'd come to slipping through the cracks, about how one moment, one choice, one dog leading him to the right door had changed everything. Thank you, Ash, Marcus whispered, stroking the dog's head. Ash's tail wagged, just once, but it was enough. 5 years later, Marcus stood in the parking lot of Station 19, watching as a young woman climbed out of a car and walked toward him. She was older now, confident, with a degree in social work and a job helping at-risk youth in Atlanta. It was Zoe. Hey, Marcus, she said, grinning. Hey yourself, Marcus said, pulling her into a hug. What brings you by? I wanted to introduce you to someone. Zoe gestured to a teenage girl standing behind her, about 15 with wary eyes and hunched shoulders. This is Jasmine. She's been through a lot. And I thought maybe Ash could meet her. Marcus smiled. Of course. He called Ash, who was older now, her muzzle graying but still sharp, still dedicated. She approached slowly, her movements gentle, and sat in front of Jasmine. Jasmine looked at the dog, then at Zoe, then at Marcus. What does she do? She finds people, Zoe said softly. People who are lost, people who need help, and she doesn't give up on them. Jasmine knelt slowly and placed a tentative hand on Ash's head. Ash leaned into the touch, her tail wagging gently, and Jasmine smiled. Just a little, but it was there. Marcus watched, his heart full, and knew that the cycle would continue. One person finding another, one dog leading the way, one moment of compassion changing everything. Sometimes heroes don't wear capes or carry badges. Sometimes they have four paws and a heart that refuses to give up. Sometimes they're the people who see you when everyone else looks away. And sometimes they're the ones who remind you that no matter how dark the world gets, there's always light, always hope, always love. Ash knew that. Marcus knew that. And because they did, lives were saved, futures were built, and the world became a little bit brighter.